This is my guitar. It's called Blackjack. I'll tell you a story about Blackjack. I'm going to tell you a story about Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen. I don't know how to start this story. Eddie was obviously an amazing guitar player, but something changed when he went into the recording studio, when they recorded the first Van Halen album. And really a lot of credit needs to be given to David Lee Roth for the development of Eddie Van Halen. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, let's start unpacking this. I'm going to just tell you this right out the gate. I'm going to deliver the bombshell. Eruption. Eddie Van Halen's Eruption wasn't recorded the way that you thought it was. This is the story of how Eruption came to be on that album. In an interview, Dave Lee Roth gave away a very integral secret that everyone sort of overlooked. He said that, and I'm going to paraphrase, I was going to say a quote, but I won't remember exactly what Lee Roth said. David Lee Roth said something to the effect of, yeah, when we got in the studio, Ed's solos, we would like put stuff together, like Ed would be playing down low, someone would up high, and David Lee Roth said that something that I and this has come through to me, Ed's come through to me and sort of confirmed this. That obviously he was so used to playing live, where he would play the rhythm track and drop out and just play the lead parts and stuff. I mean, and some of the tracks he did that, he did it exactly just like the live show. But how Eruption came to be, Lee Roth obviously had heard Eddie warm up for numerous years. And Eddie would go through all these exercises, all these different things. But Eddie would take at least, see, this is the thing, when you hear me play, like I've just picked this guitar, it's not in tune or anything. But if you hear me play this guitar, after about 20 minutes, when I've tuned it and I've started to warm up, it'll start to sound reasonable. But after 40 minutes, I'll start to sound way better, and after an hour, even better. Well, Ed always said, after he'd been playing for about 2 or 3 hours, he got into this meditative state where this is where his ideas came from. Well, Dave Lee Roth had obviously heard all this stuff. He'd obviously heard the shit stuff at the beginning, and he'd obviously heard when Eddie actually was on fire. Now, we've also got to remember that Eddie was a guy, he had variacs and stuff on the amps, so the amps didn't actually get up to working temperature instantly. So not only was Eddie warming up, the amps were warming up, everything's warming up. Dave Lee Roth went to the tape operator and said, when Eddie's going to come in early every day to warm up and do the variacs and do, he's got to go through his old rituals. And Lee Roth knew what he had to do, but he was like, just let him do his thing. But he said, here, there's 2 things I need you to do. I want you to record absolutely everything he does. And the tape op was like, why? He goes, you'll know, I'll tell you in a couple of days. So the tape op had to record everything. Now, the other thing Lee Roth knew, because Lee Roth's actually quite smart, I think his dad's a doctor or something, Lee Roth's quite smart, psychologically, he knows how things work and how the human mind works. And he realised that Ed took so long warming up because he was warming up on an electric guitar. And Lee Roth knew, because you can hear, like Jeff Beck and people like that, when they're working in their hands, they warm up on a bass. And it's something, that's got real resistance. Or nylon strung guitar. So Lee Roth had said to the tape op, or someone in the studio said, do you have a classical guitar, a nylon? And they said, yeah. And they said, bring it in, lean it against Eddie's bomb, against the delays and all that stuff, just to have it around, put it in Ed's environment so it's obvious that he's going to see it. And they're like, why? And he said, I want you to, when Ed says, what's this guitar, just tell him it's a great guitar or something, and say, challenge him, say, I bet you can't play this guitar. He said, and I want you to record it immediately. and then tell him, you know, all the best players use nylon strings to warm up because there's weight, you know, they're loose, so you got to work so much harder to make it work. And challenge, you know, go, you know, egg him on. He's like, you know, push Eddie, like dare him. He loves a challenge. If you challenge him, he'll rise to the challenge. He said, so don't record the guitar until the third day. The first day is going to be like frustrated, and you won't get the take. The second day, it'll be good, but on the third day, it'll be on fire. So they did that, and that was Spanish Fly. They recorded it, and that's Spanish Fly. It didn't make it on the first album because they had to, you know, I mean, they wanted to do more band songs. Otherwise, it had been 2 instrumentals on one album, and it's typical with Van Halen that they put 1 instrumental per album. So Spanish Fly was already recorded. Now here's the other thing, and this is a bit that makes me cry because Ed has come through to me and said that this is how it went down. Record, you know, Dave Lee Roth said record everything Ed does, just keep the machine running. Especially after he's warm, you know, when he's warming up, when he's really on fire, capture that before the band gets in. So they did. And they would record all day and do whatever, and then Ed would leave. Dave Lee Roth would leave early to, you know, make out he's out the way, but Dave would come back after, you know, he'd wait till Eddie left and he'd say, give me a call as soon as Eddie leaves. Dave would come in and he'd say, what did you record of Ed today? You know, have him warming up? And they would go through it, and Dave would go, okay, cut there, play, get rid of that. And he pieced together all bits of Eddie warming up. And he put together Eruption. Eruption was, and you, once you go back, now you've heard this story, go back and listen, you can hear all the edits. You can hear that it's pieced together. It's a piece of, the piece of music is pieced together. And Lee Roth kind of explained that in an interview, but you know, he didn't actually say, I pieced together Eruption. Now here's the bit where that you, the other guitar players, should take inspiration from, and you can use this technique because it works. They were doing the tape, they were editing down to Eruption, and they'd got it pretty good. And they were listening to playback, and because they were so into it, they didn't hear that Eddie had pulled up outside in that Ferrari. You know, usually you could hear that car you know, that burbling noise. In Hot for Teacher, that beginning bit, they claim is whatever it is, a Ferrari. Everyone knew Ed's car, but they were playing Eruption so loud that they didn't hear Eddie pull up. And Eddie walked into the studio, but he walked in the back part. He didn't get straight into the control room, but he heard this guitar playing. And Ed's first thought was like, fuck, someone's stolen all my stuff. That's my fucking, they're my licks. Someone stole, because back in those days, Randy Rhoads, all these different players, that everyone was trying to be secretive, and everyone was trying to, you know, you tried to be secretive about your equipment and about what you had going on. It was a very different time for guitar players. I came up through that era and people really guard it. It's not like now where everything's on Facebook, or not on Facebook, on YouTube. So Ed walks in and his initial reaction was one of anger and frustration. The second reaction was he went, whoever that is way better than me. Whoever that is a way better guitar player than me. So he burst into the control room and he said, where is he? Who is he? Where's this guy? And Ed is ready to like, just who the fuck, he's stolen my bit. But he also has been humbled because this guy, he wants to just see, because Ed thinks that he's really good. He knows he's really good, but there's someone better than him. Someone better than Eddie Van Halen. They turn the tape machine off. And the tape op starts laughing. And, you know, because Lee Roth said, don't ever tell him what we're doing. And Ed's really angry, and Dave's kind of like getting off on the fact that he's got one over on Eddie. But then the tape op says, you've got to tell him what you're doing. Tell him why we, you know, like, you know, because Ed was really upset. And this is where Eddie cries. Dave Lee Roth said, the guy that you're looking for doesn't exist. The guy who's playing better than you. I'm getting emotional. Eddie cried when he told him this. He said, Ed, that's you, you fucker. That's you. That's how good you are. You always say that you're not that good and you take hours to warm up. Lee Roth said, I know that you're the best, but what I've done, I've taken the best bits of you and I've put it together in a thing, just as a thing to show you, because you don't believe in yourself. You think that you're great, but you've still got an element of doubt. You know, like you're a great guitar player, but you can go to be the most phenomenal guitar player on the planet if you just have a bit more belief. And if you just, anyway, Ed listened to Eruption and he said, can you slow that down so I can figure out what I was doing? Because often guitar players do stuff, and when you're playing, you don't hear it the same way as, you know, because you're focusing on the playing. Especially if you're warming up and you're going as fast as you can, you're probably not thinking about it with musical ears. You're just trying to get through it. So now he's heard it with musical ears, and he's been, you know, and the bombshell's been laid on him that it's actually him. And he's like, oh my God, how am I going to, you know, now he's got to actually relearn it. Just like Pat Martino, when Pat Martino had half his brain removed with a brain aneurysm, he had to relearn everything. Now here's the interesting thing, relearning your own stuff, using technology like a tape machine that you can slow down, better yet a video, like this video. I found that if I play and I video myself, and I slow everything down, now it's terrible. I've only just picked the guitar, it's not even in tune. If you know, in other videos I'm going to do this and I'm going to go through, and if you want to learn some of these techniques, I'll show you literally how to do a warm-up and how you should be, you know, I'll be interested to see what your warm-ups are like, but I'll show you the proper, you know, when I say the proper, I'll show you the way to get the most mileage. There's a Steve Vai technique, Steve I, yeah, we get it. There's a whole load of stuff. You've got to get behind the psychology of people, and you've got to also know what they're telling you. Steve Vai has told you so much information that most of you don't know how to interpret what he said, because he is telling you, he's laying it out there for you, but you need an interpreter, and I'm that guy because I can interpret all this stuff. So Ed Van Halen relearned Eruption. Similarly, like, this idea is not new. Robert Fripp was in the studio with Brian Eno and David Bowie, and they did the same thing with Fripp. Fripp was like recording all this amazing, like Fripp was warming up doing crazy shit, like, just, you know what Fripp's like, all those crazy exercises. Anyway, they ran the tape, and then when Fripp had gone, they chopped the tape up and put it back together in a different order, and they sent that tape to Adrian Belew. Yeah, the same Adrian Belew who's working with Steve Vai on the road. Adrian Belew's a great guitar player, but they sent this thing of Fripp to Belew, Adrian Belew, and he had to learn it, and he learned the whole tape. And it actually wasn't, you weren't able to do that. That's what they thought, like it was Fripp, but it was chopped up in such a way that, you know, Fripp didn't do it that way. It wasn't ever played that way, but once it had been put together, see, the human psyche, in the old days, we used to hear things on the radio, and if you hear something and you go, what is that? And you try and use the imagination to try and find it, you seldom find that, but in doing, you know, looking for it, you find some other amazing things. Nowadays, because everything, you can see it, we've changed our senses over from a sense of hearing to a sense of visual. Or if it's, you know, if it's not on video, it didn't happen. Or if you don't have a photograph, it didn't. You know, it's bullshit. In the old days, that didn't exist. We didn't have video cameras. We didn't have video phones. You know, you were in a live performance. You had to try and remember what went on. Go home and try and think, oh, his hand was about there. So you did have a visual reference, but it was a live reference. But sometimes on TV you would see, but TV used to be live, didn't it? Or even if it's pre-recorded. It wasn't like we had tape recorders, you know, where you could record the program. In the early days, you didn't have any of that. You had to be there when the program aired. So, and what I'm trying to get at is, a lot of these old ways that we were forced into, there's some benefits if you start to think about the psychology of it. So this lesson is the most important one that you're going to have, is that Eddie Van Halen suddenly went to greatness when he heard himself from a different perspective, when someone else took the best parts of him and put them together in a thing called eruption, and it literally erupted the emotion in Eddie and brought, you know, I've got other Eddie stories. It's a weird thing. Eddie, his birthday is 26th of January, so he's an Aquarian. Mine's the 29th of January. I'm an Aquarian, and for some reason, I don't say I hear Eddie's voice, I don't. But it's just like this thing about eruption. Something inside my head said, you know about the eruption story, that's actually true? And I said, no, I don't know. You know, I was having this conversation, I said, what eruption story? I've never heard the eruption story. Then I remembered that Dave Lee Roth had said this whole thing that Ed had to change his style from, like, he'd play stuff down there, then he'd be there, then he'd jump around a real lot. And you have to read between the lines when people tell you things. So I had heard about the eruption story, not directly, but kind of indirectly with David Lee Roth talking about it and then reading between the lines. Anyway, I think this is long enough. I'm going to try and edit this down, but this is a really important video. And I can give you more as well, if you want.